Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Ned, and I just want to let listeners know that we are on take 3 of getting this far, just this far into the podcast before we get going. So, buckle in. It's going to be a long and lengthy ride. We are reviewing this week In the House, in the Dark of the Woods, which is by Laird. I think I'm saying that right. Hunt. Laird Hunt. I want to thank the fine folks at Brown Little and Company for sending us a review copy. We're a little late on getting to this one, as it did come out in mid-October, but nonetheless, we are reviewing it tonight. And this is going to be a really short review with probably a really long spoiler talk. And I also have something else before we even get into this. Can I tell you, I want to do something a little different.
You already are.
Gonna do something else a little different.
All right, what's up?
Normally we wait until the end to talk about Amazon reviews, right?
Yeah.
I would like to circle back to an Amazon review I saw for this before I read the book. And I think the summation is or the title line is a perfect summation for how I feel about this podcast. Jessica Sullivan, who is a top 1,000 reviewer on Amazon, gave this book 1 star, not necessarily agreeing with that part, but she said, I have no idea what I just read. That's kind of how I feel about this book, if I'm being honest.
Did you ever, now, I'm not saying this about Jessica Sullivan, that's her name, right? Jessica Sullivan? But do you ever, read something like that and think, well, what if this person's just dumb and they don't understand anything? It's a possibility that, just because they say they don't understand doesn't mean that they have the capacity to understand.
Yeah, I agree with you. And no, I'm not saying that about her. She has a top 1,000 reviewer. She does have one paragraph kind of talking about obscure fiction and stuff. I totally get what she's saying.
Yeah.
But this book is kind of a mind fuck. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, and I would. It's funny because everything that you've said so far about what's coming, I've thought today, oh, this is going to be a short review and a huge spoiler talk. And what is the message I sent you earlier? This will be an interesting review, I think is.
Yeah, something along those lines. And yeah, I think you're right. At any rate, let's give you a little bit about Laird Hunt. He is the author of The Evening Road. His previous novel, Never Home, was a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice selection, an Indie Next selection, winner of the Grand Prix de Littérature Américaine and the Bridge Prize, and a finalist for the Prix Femina Étrangère. A resident of Boulder, Colorado, he is on the faculty in the creative writing PhD program at the University of Denver.
Pause right there.
It said outdated, right? It's outdated.
No, this is current. I was on his Wikipedia. That's his current thing. But if it's in Boulder, I think he works with Stephen Graham Jones.
He could,
because Stephen Graham Jones works for the University of Colorado Boulder, and he definitely works in the English program. I don't know if it's PhD program, but
could be. This guy might be connected to some other people that we've had on this podcast.
He could have influenced him to have a wolf on the cover, because we know about Jones and his little wolf fetish he's got going on.
His little wolf fetish he has going on. Wow. All right. Rob, would you like to read the synopsis?
All right. This is not a short synopsis, and I'm always terrible at reading them, so just apologies in advance. We're not actually on the rails yet, so this is probably the best. It's for the best. The eerie, disturbing story of I'm going to skip this part. Once upon a time, there was and there wasn't a woman who went to the woods. In this horror story set in colonial New England, a law-abiding Puritan woman goes missing. Or perhaps she has fled or abandoned her family. Or perhaps she's been kidnapped and set loose to wander in the dense woods of the north. Alone and possibly lost, she meets another woman in the forest. Then everything changes. On a journey that will take her through dark woods, full of almost human wolves, through a deep well, wet with the screams of men, and on a living ship made of human bones, our heroine may find that the evil she flees has been inside her all along. In the House, in the Dark of the Woods is a novel of psychological horror and suspense told in Laird Hunt's characteristically lyrical prose style. It is the story of a bewitching, a betrayal, a master huntress, and her quarry. It is a story of anger, of evil, of hatred, and of redemption. It is the story of a haunting, a story that makes up the bedrock of American mythology, but told in a vivid way you will never forget.
If a lot of that doesn't make any sense to you, it's not Rob's delivery.
Nope.
the
Credit where credit's due. It's a confusing book, and I think they really leaned into that with the synopsis. Like they're not tricking you into thinking this is going to be easy to read.
Right. Oddly enough, the synopsis makes more sense after you've read the book.
It really does.
So again, this was sent to us. I mean, it was blurred by Brian Evanson. I mean, it didn't take a lot for us to decide on doing this book. So I didn't read the synopsis. Had I read the synopsis, I may have said, man, maybe we should just skip this goddamn book. But after reading the book and hearing Rob read the synopsis, I'm like, yeah. You know what? This is pretty goddamn accurate. But unfortunately, Little Brown and Company, this is not, you don't write a synopsis so that people love and get the synopsis and it draws them in after they've read the book, I guess. What did we review recently? I thought the synopsis was great. Is it Alice Isn't Dead? The synopsis was fantastic.
Yeah.
This one, not so much from reading it ahead of the book, I would say.
I guess it depends on I don't know. Like, I think this is kind of like a hold my beer synopsis where it's like it's almost kind of challenging you to not be interested in it. So there's going to be that type of person that's like, well, it's a challenge, I'm down. And then they go for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But again, I don't know if that's how you want to sell a book. I mean, I get what you're saying. I just think that you're kind of, I don't know. Let me put it this way. Had I picked this up in a bookstore back when I used to go to bookstores 8-9 years ago, I probably would have put it back on the shelf.
All right. I just had the best idea in the entire history of the podcast.
Oh, is this better than the hot seat?
Nothing's going to, we prepare before we start recording a review, our own synopsis of the book and compare it to the synopsis that was actually published.
That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea at all. I kind of like that idea.
The biggest problem is we have to remember to do it.
Well, yeah. So I didn't think this was actually ever going to happen, much like all the other great Pie-Chos. We never made Pie-Chos to sell, right? We never did the hot seat.
Our spin-off podcast, 100 Happy Days.
I was just going to say, I couldn't remember what it was called. The Happy Days podcast never happened. I mean, we've had some great ideas, and we've never moved on any of them. At any rate, we're going to move into a review of this book. So, despite what the synopsis says, this book starts off with a woman who is a wife and a mother. She's referred to, and I'm not going to try to explain all this. We're going to call her Goody, Goody, for the length of this review. For simplicity's sake, it's what other people call her in the book, although it's not her name. So she does set off to collect some berries to bring back and make a special treat for her husband and her son. And through a course of events, she winds up becoming lost in the woods.
Now, it bears mentioning that from the very beginning of the book, the woman seemed simple. Now, the book is set in colonial America, so it's post-Revolutionary War or pre or right around the time of the Revolutionary War, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I mean, people have guns. So
yeah, and they're wearing those red coats. So maybe it's during the Revolutionary. Anyway, not a historian. She seems simple in a way that I couldn't just reconcile with the fact that this is old-timey shit going on. She seems a little bit childlike in the way that the book is written in the first person as if she's talking to us, as if she's telling us a story. And so she's just explaining to us that she decided it would be great to get, to go pick some fresh berries to make a treat for her. She says, my man and my boy, I think is what she says, or my man and my son. And just the way that she seems quite oblivious to the realities of the world. At one point she comes in contact with a Native American. They call him First Folk. And he's obviously displeased with her being in what I'm assuming is supposed to be strictly native land. And she's picking all the signals up, like he's making a frowny face and he's pointing at her to go away. And she just kind of like half naive, half arrogantly like says, "There's enough for everybody," or something like that. And it's just there's a simplicity to the way that she carries herself in the world, as if she doesn't really fully understand how it works or the dangers in there. Would you agree with that?
Sort of. So yes, she is very simple, and I agree with that. I actually got the idea that the man that she encounters was warning her more than scolding her. Yeah. Which does turn out to be the case, I guess I should say. We're going to talk a little bit about, I don't know how far we're going to go into the story, but I did get that distinct feeling that he was warning her off and not, threatening her or getting her to just like leave his area. But yeah, she is very simple. She never really mentions her husband or child by name. She does just talk about the simple life that she leads and that they have, she was promised a lot of things by her husband. They didn't come to be delivered, like living in a big house and stuff, that they live very simply. And you can tell that there's a time frame thing because her husband is kind of a dick to her. You don't get the feeling there's a lot of love there. There's a lot of him drunkenly kissing her if she wants it or not, that kind of thing. So it does seem like kind of like your old school country bumpkin, like
your typical boorish man of the house kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and I don't know how often I think about colonial life, but it is typically depicted that way by and large, even if you have a heroine that's smarter than the other women or a guy who's more gallant than the rest of them. Usually they're like the supporting cast in a colonial movie that you would watch.
Right, yeah. Now, things go off the rails for Goody almost immediately. It's so basically she wanders off to get some berries, and like gets it. And I don't know if I want to get your take on this. There's a part where she takes her shoes off to like walk in the stream, and then she steps on something that like pokes her foot, and soon after gets really sleepy. And I don't know if she was supposed to get sleepy because of the thing that poked her foot, or if that was just coincidental. But what do you think about that?
I really didn't give it any thought.
Well, I was trying to, like, people don't just suddenly become sleepy and go lay down by a tree. So,
right.
So I felt like something caused it, and I feel like it was this weird transition between the innocent way that, we're kind of intended to interpret the story at first versus the more supernatural way we're intended to kind of realize after the fact. And I feel like this might be that transition point a little bit. But the poking her foot seemed, if you said it, there's got to be a reason for it. And maybe I just thought too much about it.
Yeah, I guess, in hindsight, you're right. Now that I've read the rest of the story, I'm not sure at the time that I gave it a whole lot of thought. You know what I mean? But now that you say it, sure, it's after the fact. Yeah, we can look back and kind of guess that that's where it is. So clearly she becomes panicked. She wakes up. She's, it's nighttime. She has no idea where she is. As you might imagine, this is troublesome for anybody. And pretty soon thereafter, she encounters Captain Jane, who is just doing her thing, going through the forest, wearing her coat made of wolf's fur, like a cloak, who says, "Oh, no, I know I can take you somewhere and have somebody help you and put you on the mend and help you get home. I'm going to take you to Eliza, who lives just down this hill," or whatever, in reference to this. So we're introduced to Eliza. Eliza lives by herself in the house in the dark of the woods. But she's got a pretty sweet deal going. She's got a garden. She's got some pigs and a cow and stuff. So everything seems to be pretty well. And Goody goes into her care for a period of time.
Yeah. So the conceit around her needing to be taken care of is that she is in her crazy, panicked run through the woods in the middle of the night where she got lost. She fucked up her feet pretty seriously and can't walk. And so she needs to kind of like rest and recover. And so thankfully, Eliza is there with like just a bounty of herbs and stuff like that, and helps her heal. And it seems kind of perfect. Like she's super nice, super welcoming and friendly, and and chummy and stuff like that. And at the outset of this little kind of, rest period where she's, Goody's trying to heal up so she can get back to her family, she could not have found a better house to recover in, because Eliza is like the perfect host and super nice and interesting and stuff like that.
So over the course of undisclosed number of days, as Rob had said, everything's going really well, but we start to see a little bit of depth to Eliza. Some things that just don't add up properly, some things that she teaches Goody or shows Goody that are outside the realm of at least somebody as simple as her, if not even out of the realm of, what the reader is seeing or feeling. And this is where we're going to get super vague, right? Like I don't know where to go. The story's about Goody and Eliza and their relationship. There are some things in well, no, because you didn't read that first part. There's not a lot in the synopsis then. We skipped the first part of the synopsis that talks about what kind of story it is. But I guess if anybody else is reading it, I guess this would be a good time, right? The eerie, disturbing story of one of our perennial fascinations, witchcraft in colonial America, wrapped up in a lyrical novel of psychological suspense.
So we did this. We kind of did the synopsis reading the way that the book plays out.
Yeah.
In a fucked up order.
So Eliza may or may not be a witch, I guess.
She could be a witchy woman. Yeah. And so I guess from here, it's the story progresses on. Obviously, when Goody arrives to kind of get help from Eliza, her whole purpose is, I need to get back to my family. And so the story progresses kind of toward, how does that happen? There's a couple other characters that haven't been mentioned yet. There's a little girl named Hope. We find out her name later in the book, but she kind of just pops up throughout the story, seemingly at specific kind of situations. Won't talk too much about that. There's also a character named Granny someone.
Because that's not creepy.
Not creepy at all. Yeah, who is just this old woman who, again, just arrives at certain points in the plot to do a very specific thing. There's not a lot more we can say without spoiling. Like, the majority of this story is it relies on twists and reveals, and we're at the point where, like, the reveals will start to spoil.
One of the other things the book spends a lot of time doing is giving us backstory on Goody. So, I mean, we get a little bit of backstory on, like, Eliza through, like, things she says, but we really revisit Goody's childhood, her relationship with her mother and her father, her, transitioning from that relationship to the relationship between her and her husband. We get some glimpses into her daily, life with her husband, her man, and her boy. So it's not all there, but a lot of that, correlates to what's going on in the story at the time.
Yeah. So there are a couple of fundamental things that are kind of flashbacky to Goody's childhood with her father going out and encountering a creepy dude and stuff like that, that play a bigger part in the story later on. Yeah.
Yeah, with that... Like I said, it's going to be a really short book review. That's the trouble, man. Like, some of these, and this is why spoiler talk is great for me, and perhaps for you if you're a Patreon subscriber and you listen, is that they're just these books. Like, I don't even know how to recommend this. This is the kind of book, like, if I recommended it to somebody, I'd be like, look, man, just trust me on this. It's colonial. It's a little slow at first. It's really wordy at parts. But just trust me. Just trust me on this. You just got to read it, because there's no way to really tell somebody what this is about and give the book a fair shake while allowing people to discover the story on their own. And it's tough to stretch this out for more than 10 minutes, 12 minutes, right? Where Rob and I have given you 20% of the book, maybe, if that. And the next 80% of the book is got to be, buried under paywalls and shit for people who want to know about it.
Oh my God,
that,
we're paywalling people. I didn't even think of that.
I mean, essentially, right? I mean, that's because that's where the rest of the discussion has to happen.
I guess one thing that I would like to approach is that I don't know if I saw it on Amazon or somewhere, but this is, considered a horror book, and I don't know if we mentioned that. But yeah, it's kind of categorized as a horror book, and it does mention in the synopsis witchcraft. It doesn't mention American mythology. It is in a colonial time, so like it's a good place setting for really creepy stuff to happen. There's a character named Granny Someone that's never going to be a good thing. So there's like plenty of creepy, scary stuff going on. It does get a little graphic at times, and I like the word that keeps popping up in my head is like folklore, because it's got like a very folklore kind of feel to it. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I'll expand on that a little bit. I think that some of the characters in this book individually would be the stories your grandma told you about to keep you from going in the woods.
Yeah, 100%.
So Granny Someone, even Captain Jane, Eliza would be the cautionary tales of, be careful, little Robbie. If you go too close to the trees, you could run into Granny Someone, and Granny Someone is blah, 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 blah. So as a whole...
Granny Someone is behind the paywall.
Yeah. So, as a story, I think it's very complex for folklore, but on an individual basis, these would be the stories that you tell kids around a campfire, or to keep them from wandering off too far from the little stone house you live in. Yeah.
Do you want to just kick it over to spoiler talk?
All right. Paywall talk over at patreon.com/booked. For only $1 a month, you can hear, and this, I know, like, this is totally like clickbait. I'm not clickbaiting this. I'm really not. I get the feeling Rob and I are going to dive into some things. I think we're going to convince each other of things. We do that over there so that we don't spoil a book that you might want to read. We also do it so that Rob can keep the lights on at the podcast studio. That's not really why, right?
I was going to say, like... So Rob can have an excuse to accidentally pay for services we don't use anymore.
So yeah, we'll talk about that a little later and why we need everyone to up their contribution. So at any rate, we're going to head over and do spoiler talk, and we'll be right back.
All right, we are back from a lengthy spoiler talk. As we predicted, we had a lot of stuff to talk about. I think we may have cleared up some stuff, may muddied some more waters, like more muddied than maybe they were before we started talking about it. But it was an interesting conversation, and if you have read the book, please listen to that, and we'd love to have a conversation to kind of continue this conversation, because it's a very interesting and complex thing to kind of consider. So this is definitely one of those books where it can be a live conversation with anybody who has read it. Big stuff happening.
I am not sure that it was not Laird Hunt's plan that conversations about this only muddy the waters more. That's the kind of book this is. I don't, even though there is a good portion of the story is revealed in a pretty clean way. If you start thinking too much about it, I don't want to say that falls apart. It's just that it introduces new questions to which I'm not sure there are answers. Right. As I've been told before, even maybe in the author's mind, which is still bullshit. He knows exactly what all that shit meant. That being said, we're going to move into wrap-ups, right? I don't think there's a lot else for us to talk about.
It's wrap-up time.
All right. I'm going to go first this time.
Cool.
This book is by its page count, by its size, I have the physical book, is a not very big book. But it is packed pretty densely with words. And I'll be honest with you, the first couple chapters did not go well for me. I was not feeling this book at all. I thought, first of all, I think I mentioned this on the podcast before, because I think Rob was just perplexed when I say things like, I don't like books that take place in the outdoors. Do you remember me saying that to you before?
Wait.
Have I not said this to you before? I feel like I know this. If I didn't, I know exactly how this conversation goes down. Yeah.
I do know that you have said that. But you've said some weird stuff.
Yeah, like books that take place in the wilderness just bother me, and I don't know what it is. It's an immediate turnoff. And then this one started out really dense with a simple woman getting lost in the forest while looking for berries, and I was thinking, just fuck my life, man. Why are we doing this? But we get introduced to some other characters, and I think once the Eliza Goody relationship starts to develop is when this really grabbed me, and then it held on. It held on strong all the way till the end of the book. There is a good number of supernatural things that occur. Some of them probably even a little too fantastical for this book, in my opinion. But there's some really great stuff that happens too. Rob and I talked in spoiler talk about how not only is it supernatural, but there are some like fantasy elements. I know we talked about folklore here and children's, cautionary tales. You tell your kids to keep them in line, and all those things are present and done in a really, really good way. There's a couple open threads. There's a couple things Rob and I either couldn't agree on or couldn't come to conclusions on. And you know what? In the course of this book, I'm perfectly okay with it because the big story is there and it's intact. And God damn it, it's pretty scary. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I'm going to give it 4.5 stars.
I could not be more surprised. Like so a hallmark of a book that Livius doesn't like is making you work for it a little bit. Would you agree, or am I being a little harsh?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I just think that this made you work for it a little bit, but was very rewarding.
Oh, okay. So
do you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's books that can make you work for stuff and then just leave things super ambiguous and whatever, and that's not really my thing. I didn't mind that the book was hard and complex because I think that he delivered enough of an explanation. And we didn't talk about this a lot during the actual review. We talked about it a little bit in spoiler talk where things from earlier come back to make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a talent that you have to do that. I recently watched an episode of Doctor Who, not to get too far off the subject, but it was time travel done right, which that show has lost scope of over the last few years, in my opinion. But where there are things introduced at the beginning that are then explained, like, they're kind of significant, but then at the end, when they're explained, they take on a much, much bigger significance. Mm. And I think when that's done properly, not that this is a time travel story, but it's written in that similar kind of way, that the things you read before, like when you talked about her getting sleepy after getting stabbed in the foot and stuff, it didn't occur to me that was actually like a plot device. But after reading the rest of the book, I'm pretty certain it was a plot device. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like that kind of stuff. I think it was just done really well.
Well, Livius's wrap up very much represents everything I felt about the book too. So I'm just going to do my best not to repeat stuff that he said. But one of the kind of overarching things that I think about this story that I think was great was that in general, it has a very strong internal logic to it. Which, if you listen to our spoiler conversation, will make more sense than if you have not. But the story has a very strong kind of internal logic and set of rules and stuff that it follows and it emphasizes in a way where when you're unaware, you see it and you understand that something's happening, and it's when the entire story is revealed that you get kind of the internal logic of things. But it does a good job being a foundation for helping you through what could be considered very confusing and nonsensical and just unclear. And I believe that an intention of the story is to like take you in a certain direction, possibly misleadingly. There's definitely reveals that will turn you in a way that you didn't expect, and twists and stuff like that. And so it was all just executed, I think, very intricately, like a puzzle or like the machinations of a clock or something like that. Like there's a lot of moving parts that have to work together in order for the story to be satisfying, and the dude makes it happen in a creepy setting with a lot of unsure things going on. And it's the type of story that makes you have to just go along with it, whether you like it or not, and just deal with whatever comes. And I love those types of stories because there's no safety net. You're just kind of out there, and whatever hits, and you have no control over it. But it was very, very well executed, and I think it paid off greatly. even if we're still a little bit confused at the end of reading it, and even even if we're confused after talking about it, the story is very satisfying for all the reasons that Livius said. So I'm going to go straight up. I'm going to go for 4.5 stars.
That puts a little bit ahead of the average Amazon review, including that. I still, what the fuck did I just read? I still find to be a very
valid.
Yeah, I'm not, I started that way, and I don't want you to think I changed my mind. I still kind of like, not sure what happened there. It's funny because through the course of this review, I looked a little bit at some of his other books, and this seems to be of the three that I looked at in total, the only one that has like the supernatural. They all seem to be like period pieces.
Yeah.
But this is the one that's off the fucking rails. Now, I do want to read JMG's review because I think it's so wrong, and I don't know. I guess maybe not having maybe if I read the synopsis, I don't know how to feel about this. Don't fall for it. This is a 2-star review. I was taken in by the descriptions of this little book and feel a bit ripped off. While the writing is lovely, the story is lacking, and then this in quotation marks suspense, lacking in quotation marks psychological horror, lacking in fact any substance. Mr. Hunt apparently is attempting an artsy highbrow version of a colonial America witchcraft story, but less art and more story would make for a more entertaining couple of hours. I didn't see the art stuff that he's talking about, and I saw a lot of story, and I don't I'm just a little confused. There is another 2-star review by Carol. Strange, confusing read, confusing narrative, difficult to find a focal point or become interested in a character or direction of plot, almost called it quits a couple times, gave it my all. Though rereading pages and chapters because of BC of enticing book summary book summary depicting witchcraft in colonial New England, but a no-go in a long 224 pages for me. Honestly, no clue I was even in colonial America. Yeah, the book could have been set anywhere in any country at any time, with the exception of the soldiers that are mentioned. At one point, there really isn't a lot of direction. This could have been in the woods of Hungary just as much as in the woods of the United States. So, I mean, I kind of get that, but I guess that's the difference. I also found it a strange and somewhat confusing read. Sometimes difficult to find a focal point. It is a long 224 pages, but that I still give that more than double the score that this woman did with almost essentially the same review if you think about it.
Well, yeah, and I guess that's it. Like, some people appreciate that approach to writing and others won't. This woman apparently did not care for it. I mean, there was just, for me, so much going on, so much interesting stuff, and so much, like, I just wanted to see, like, you reach a point in the book where enough fucking confusing things happen that you're like, I just want to know how this plays out. So for me, that was the hook, was just like, what the hell is going on with these crazy bitches in the woods?
See, now you talked about us doing synopses. Maybe we should be titling books too, because I think that What's Up with All These Crazy Bitches in the Woods is a better title for this book. And think about it. Think about how many more people would pick up that book if they said, this fucking book's got a picture of a wolf on the cover and it's called What's Up with All These Crazy Bitches in the Woods. And if we wrote a more enticing synopsis, we could sell more books.
Oh my God, yeah. And then I bet you those 2-star reviews you've been reading, 4 or 5 stars.
Exactly.
Without changing a word in the book.
So if you own a publishing company and you want to pay us a lot of money to clean up some of these little problems for you, like book titles and the book synopsis, author bios, we're available, man. We will do this for you for a price yet to be determined.
For a handsome fee.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that how it goes? Anyway. Any more Amazon shenanigans here?
No, the rest of them are mostly good reviews. I mean, it's only got 18 reviews. You have 3 that are 2 or less stars, and the rest of them are, 3, 4, and 5. Nothing that really jumped out at me out of there.
So one thing I want to point out, we noticed, you and I both noticed, one of the blurbs is by Brian Evanson, who we have mentioned. We've interviewed him twice. We've reviewed at least 3 of his works, right? 3 or 4.
Yeah, 3, I think. But yeah.
And
Well, no, because he also did the novelization of the Lords of Salem. So I think it might be 4. Yeah,
because we did that Collapse of Horses, we did the Lords of Salem thing, we did that Warren. Mm-hmm. You didn't like the sci-fi one.
Yeah,
he was in the Warmed and Bound book, so that's at least 4 things. Anyway, Ivanson's all over this. Oh wait, yeah, and didn't he do the thing with Paul Tremblay at the beginning of the year?
Yes, that's the other one I was thinking of. Yep.
Yeah, and he blurbs this book, and through just the most minor amount of research, I discovered that at one point Laird Hunt taught, and maybe still does actually teach, courses at Brown University, where Brian Evanson was the head of something until he moved out to California. So not only is Laird Hunt now in Colorado, in my mind, hanging out like at a taco place with Stephen Graham Jones all the time, he used to work with and pal around, I'm guessing, with Brian Evanson over in Brown University. Those are some nice elbows to be rubbing. You know what I'm saying?
They are, for sure. And then, for all we know, he doesn't really know any of these people. And
well, don't spoil the fantasy. In my mind, I know this power trio of people now.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say something super spoiler.
Yeah, that's what's gonna happen.
All right, are we done? Are we putting this one to bed? I have something else I want to mention.
To bed. It's tucked in. The night light's on.
On a pallet.
Yeah.
In a house.
It's tied up
in the
ropes.
Dark.
Yeah.
In the woods. Hey, so earlier, Misty Bennett was sending over her a list of books that we could be reviewing for her pick for Book of the Year as being a top Patreon contributor. And she had asked about Let the Right One In, which is by John Ajvide Lindqvist. I don't know if I'm saying any of that right. Yeah. Dude, he had a new book sneak past us last month. Oh,
no. Seriously?
October 16th, 2018. So I think, and it's a little longer one. So I think we're going to try to get this one in by the end of the year. Because you've never read any of his stuff, correct?
I read about half of Let the Right One In, and then something stopped. I loved what I had read so far, but something interrupted it, and I never got back to it.
Yeah. I read 2 of his books. Let the Right One In was much better, but he has a book out called I Am Behind You.
I just looked behind myself.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, this sounds really fucking weird, but I'm thinking we should try to give this one a shot for a book before we get to the end of the year. But that being said, we do have Misty's pick for our next book. Rob, share with the listeners what we're going to be reviewing, not next week, but the following week.
All right, pulling it off my shelf right now. All right. The publisher is McAdam Cage. The year 2006. The author, Stephen Graham Jones. Demon Theory. An early work by Stephen Graham Jones, I believe. One of his first few. Am I right?
I believe so, yes. And, listeners might be interested. Some people are like, how the fuck have you guys not read Demon Theory? Well, we didn't read Demon Theory, and we didn't read All the Beautiful Sinners, and I think there's another one we didn't read because we got into the game a little late.
Yeah, we did.
So Misty is giving us a chance to right a wrong. Now, we're going to be reading this very interestingly. McAdam Cage is out of business and has been for many years, so there are no new print copies. I could get a physical copy, but probably not in time for this review. So I'm going to read it the way that most people are likely to read this if they listen to a review, which is a Kindle version. Now, normally I don't make a big deal about this, but there is an interesting and rare, I would say, in fiction feature of this book that looks like it might hurt my reading experience. Rob, would you care to share with the listeners as you thumb through your book what you see?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear the pages.
Oh, I can hear them.
All right. So the book is just very consistently riddled with footnotes throughout, in a very David Foster Wallace way, where like some pages, 3/4 of the page is footnote. So it's heavily footnoted. And from what I understand, there in the lifetime of Demon Theory, the book I have, which was given to me by Jesse Lawrence, who is one of our holiday permanent staff, I have the right copy, which is the one that has footnotes consistent with the pages that they relate to. There, I believe, was another print copy where all of the footnotes were pushed to the back of the book, and basically when you saw a footnote, you had to flip back to the back of the book, find the footnote, read it, go back to the page you're on. So there's been some shenanigans with footnotes, and from what I understand, Livius, you were saying that it doesn't look so good for the digital footnoting.
I read a review. Now, I was going to try to read this on my Kindle, and then it occurred to me that maybe I'll have better luck on the iPad, because the Kindle app is a different creature on the iPad, where the only way to get those footnotes is to search for the number of the footnote.
Oh, God.
Let me tell you exactly how often that's going to happen if that's the case.
Zero
None.
times. Yeah.
0 times. I will be reading the sans footnotes if that is the case. I wanted to read the whole thing, but just to get this done in time, it was going to take up to 6 business days. I know you guys are hearing this like probably the day before Thanksgiving or whatever. It just wasn't realistic for me to get that done in the right amount of time. So I opted for the Kindle version. And quite honestly, unless you want to order a used book, if you hear our review and want to read it, that's going to be the easiest way for you to do it. Not to mention, it was like $3, which is ridiculously cheap for a Kindle book, which more and more costs more than paperbacks and in some cases than hardcovers. So we'll see how this goes. But I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I have yet to be let down by Stephen Graham Jones. I still think that The Cyclist is one of the best novellas. The Night Cyclist?
Night Cyclist, yeah.
It's one of the best novellas I've read. So I'm really, really looking forward to getting into this, although I do understand it might be a hot mess in digital format.
Man, I was just looking at my bookshelf the other day for some reason. Not that I need a reason. And I was looking at some of the titles of his that we've reviewed over the years. And I'm like, oh, man, what I wouldn't give to just go back and read Zombie Bake Off. Or, because it's such a fun, clever, like turn on zombies, and not Lisa My Scars, of course, but like The Last Final Girl, like from where I was when I read that book to where I am now, with my understanding of like the genre of horror and everything, I'd love to revisit that just to see like how much did he approach in the slasher genre that I wasn't aware of that I am now. Like I just wish I could go back and read all of his stuff again. So if this podcast ever gets like shut down by the FCC or something, I know the first thing I'm going to do is just reread some Stephen Graham Jones.
Yeah, it's weird. He's all over the board with stuff he writes. That's the kind of interesting part. 'Cause even the ones you mentioned, they're just in completely different like genres. So we'll see where Demon Theory falls into that. Rob, Thanksgiving in a couple days, man. Do you have anything you're thankful for?
All right, I'm going to tell you, there was this part of, all right, so I was at work today, and like there was like the morning meeting kind of thing going on, and where I sit at my desk is close enough to where these meetings take place that I don't have to go out and join them because I can just hear everything that's going on. So I didn't join them. I just kind of stayed at my desk, and like one of the final things of the conversation was going around the whole group and asking what you're thankful for.
Oh, God.
And in my mind the whole time I'm like, I am just thankful that I don't have to contribute to this. Like, it's like fucking I mean, I get it. It's a nice thing to do, but I was just thinking, it made me think like I don't have a specific thing I'm very thankful for right now, and that I don't want that to sound sad. Like everything in life is good, but it's not like, oh man, I'm really glad this is going on. It's just life is fine. So I'm in this kind of weird like moment where nothing is good enough for me to be like, holy shit, super grateful for this. What about you?
I mean, I'm never grateful for anything, so I'm glad that there's no pressure for me to come up with something.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful that we're still doing the podcast, that this is our 8th Thanksgiving that we're doing the podcast, right? Be our 8th or 7th?
Yeah, it's 8th. I just had to count on my fingers. Like
that's all right. Yeah.
2011, 2012. Yeah.
I'm just still glad that we're doing this. I'm thankful that we have exceeded, but God, we're going to exceed by nearly double last year's output for reading books for the podcast. So, I mean, I'm happy about that. Thankful for that.
Let's pause on that for a second because I was doing the math. Key page count for 2018 so far, including the book we just reviewed, 9,576 pages.
Boom.
2017 was 5,312.
Mm-hmm.
And 2016 was the 5,854. So theoretically, it's possible that we could hit the point where we add up 2016 and 2017, and that's the same as 2018. That could happen.
Let's do it, man. This next book's 440 pages, so if that's going to get us a 10K.
We got to get to like 11,066 or something like that. So I
think we can do it.
I think we can do that, and I would be thankful for that. And all right, so because we're being thankful, Livius, you went and you you did the obvious thing, which would be to be thankful for the podcast and the listeners and all that sappy. Livius is the one that has a heart, obvious. If we haven't demonstrated that before, we absolutely did just now. I do want to actually thank some people. JR and Diana, longtime friends of ours and friends of the podcast, who sent some amazing beers from California in a way that's totally not illegal. So it's kind of their fault. They introduced me to this beer. I fell in love with it, and now they feel obligated to send it to me. But thanks to both of you for being so thoughtful and sending that to me. And I'm amassing a collection of some nice barrel-aged Chicago area beers as a thank you package to go back to you guys.
Hey, this could be a silly question, but there's nothing geographically different about beer, right? Based like where wine, like you have like grapes from Washington or grapes from California or France or wherever, right? Like
there absolutely could be. So, depending on where ingredients are sourced from, and I'm speaking not as someone who is an expert in beer at all, but like, there's like some fundamental ingredients that are in all beer everywhere, but like water, for example, in the Midwest could be entirely different than the water that they're using in California, to enough of a degree where it would add different characteristics to the end result of a beer. So yeah. And then hops, things like that. So if people are using all locally sourced ingredients that are, unique to a region, then yeah, it will yield a different result in like Maine than it would in Seattle.
Interesting.
Yeah,
seriously, like I didn't think about that. I guess I know grapes, are like, grapes in Italy tend to be whatever, more blah, 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 some shit like that when you're talking about wine.
Well, and you think about because I mentioned barrel aging beers, there's something unique to Chicago that other areas might not experience. And so like, this is something that's really nerdy. Goose Island makes the Bourbon County stouts, and they probably have the biggest barrel aging program of any beer company that exists. It's just massive. And so they have this huge warehouse in Chicago where they barrel age their beers, and they specifically don't temperature control the warehouse. And for anybody who's familiar with Chicago, in the summer it can get up to 100 degrees, and the winter it can be like negative 20. And so the barrel aging process experiences the extremes in temperature that Chicago does, which makes it unique to the aging process for Chicago that like a California brewery wouldn't be able to do unless they really went out of their way to like recreate that experience.
Right. Yeah. Because it never gets anywhere near that cold. Yeah. That's interesting. And I guess temperature does have an effect.
Yeah. So there you go. The more you know.
I don't know. I find that if you have, all right. I find that if you have a soda, if you have a Diet Coke, you went and bought it at the store and you put it in the fridge and you took it out and for some reason didn't open it and left it out overnight and put it back in the fridge, it doesn't taste the same.
Oh.
Like not as good. So maybe Goose Island would be even better if they temperature controlled their fucking aging.
And that's the thing. I don't think they've ever tried to. So like, maybe they should. Maybe they should. Maybe they should at least give it a shot to like, for the sake of, experimentation.
Listen, is Goose Island that good, or is it just that they're like the biggest microbrewery in the world? Like that's the real question.
Here's what I'll say from the beers that I have tried that are like the barrel aged stouts and stuff, which is what their Bourbon County thing is most known for. They have a very consistently good product, whereas like you go into some of these other like other breweries that are less consistent, have smaller barrel programs, less experienced people doing the barrel aging and stuff like that, the quality is less reliable. So you will find, I mean, like there's tons of breweries that like do way better than Goose Island, but Goose Island, I think the thing I like about them is that when you open up that bottle, you can count on it being a good quality product like every time. And there's Avery in Colorado is a brewery I think that does the same stuff. Like they're very consistent. Lagunitas, not necessarily for barrel aging. So like there are breweries that have like established themselves to an extent where like you know you're getting a quality product no matter what, and then the other ones you're kind of rolling the dice.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Every time JR and Diana come up, like I end up explaining beer to you. It's a weird like consistency.
I still don't want to drink it, but I do think that some of this stuff is pretty interesting. So I started listening to some beer podcasts and yeah, I know. Some of it's fascinating. Some of it is just like there's so like recently in the last week or two, a ton of just super high quality beers have been released in the Chicagoland area. And in years past, I would be lining up for every single one of them and running around and spending tons of money. And I did buy some beer this past weekend, but only because I had never tried it before. I passed up like a handful of beers that I know that I would really love to have, just because I'm kind of getting worn out by the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And Goose Island's Bourbon County is releasing Black Friday, which is 3 days away. And I just don't even have the energy to think about it right now. I mean, yeah, I remember it was a Black Friday just 2 years ago where you're standing in line somewhere for.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. Yeah, I lined up at Binny's.
Oh my God!
Man, I will not do that again.
That is hilarious. I work in retail. There will be no lining up for me as I will be at work for long hours this coming Friday. I know that in your current, people know you work in retail, but in your current position, I imagine it's going to be a regular old day for you. Are you even working?
I am. So thankfully, my company does not open on Thanksgiving Day, which is amazing. And I believe it sounds like yours won't be either this year.
Correct.
So they realized that it's stupid to do that. Yeah, it will be a crazy day for everybody in the store but me, because I sit in the back doing office stuff. So it'll just be like any other day for me, just with less people bothering me because they're going to be running around crazy helping people.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
Well, that's it. Hopefully you listeners all have a great Thanksgiving. Rob, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Get to reading that book. It's a little long. And then, what we're doing is we're taking next week off, in order to read this book. And we did do three in a row. So we're going to interlude next week, which means it's going to be, it's like 6 days of really not giving it any thought, a seventh day of trying to think of some stuff and then winging it for 45 minutes, which is how we've done our last umpteen interlude. So you can look forward to that next week.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Until then, I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Ned, and happy Thanksgiving.